started recording, so it's official from now on. No one should say anything bad or confess in any crimes. I usually do that pre-recording. So hi, everyone. Super excited. I also got actually a lot of emails from folks who are not able to join for whatever reason. And they were like, are you going to record? Are you going to record? So we're making sure that we will record and distribute the recording afterwards so that everyone can watch this first ever Fireside chat that we have in our community. And we have a really good one. We did not save the best for the last. We just took it as the first thing. We may regret it later, but we're gonna solve it when it comes, right? So I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Mike Herring, on your screens. Mike is a CFO who has operated at the highest level of scale and transformation. He's taken companies from early growth all the way to IPO and beyond, including leading Omniture from 20 million to 350 million and its IPO, and serving as CFO and president at Pandora as it grew into a multi-billion-dollar company. He also played a played a key role in some of the most important shifts in tech, like helping build the operational foundation for Adobe's transition to SaaS, and is currently the CFO at Viz.ai. You have no idea, but as
Viz.
Viz, that's the I was going to.
Viz would be pretty amazing. So, then we back at Adobe or whatever.
That's a non-English speaker problem. You know that I literally have a problem with W and V before I's. I don't know why. So you chose a very interesting company to work at. I wouldn't go, because I wouldn't be able to introduce myself. It's an AI healthcare company. What makes Mike especially unique is that he's not just a finance operator. He's someone who deeply understands how to build a financial story and architecture that holds up under real public market scrutiny. On a personal note, Lucy and I both had a privilege to work working with Mike at Google. So this one is very special and meaningful for us. Mike was Lucy's boss and was boss of my boss for me when we were at Google. But that was a long time ago. So I introduced you, Mike, but I will let you to walk us through a little bit of your career journey before we dive into some of the questions that we have to you today.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. It was really nice to meet you all. And thank you, Nazik and Lucy, for inviting me. It was fun to catch up with you guys just in the prep, but really nice to meet a bunch of other people and a global audience too. It was really fun. I'm at Viz.ai is an AI native health tech company. We can talk about that a little bit at some point. It's my 6th CFO startup role. I spent 9 years as a public company CFO. I've been the 20th employee in a real baby startup, and I reported to Ruth Port as one of the 5 divisional CFOs at Google. And at Adobe, I ran global operations. It was essentially the COO. I reported to the CFO, but I was running all the back office while they pivoted from 100% CDs into 100% cloud delivered software. So that was quite an adventure. I've kind of seen a lot of different scales and different angles of business models. I am an accidental CFO. That was not my goal. I wanted to be a professor, always did. I wanted to be an economics professor, but I graduated college with a bunch of debt, which most Americans do, and so the only ones hiring in 1991, not to date myself too aggressively, were the accounting firms, and so I took 6 accounting classes in my senior year and got a job at Ernst & Young in San Francisco, right as the tech boom was just kind of starting. And I 2 years, 2 months, got my CPA and was out, but I worked on 3 tech IPOs as an early auditor. And I was like, this is kind of interesting, interesting businesses, inventing business models. That was part of the thing that was interesting, is as platforms and ecosystems and the way data flowed, and this is before the internet, changed, whole new ways of doing business has changed. And so there was all this product innovation, but there needed to be business model and financial innovation following quickly, or nothing would happen. You couldn't build these businesses. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really cool. I'm going to do that. But I took a detour into biotech because I got a job as a controller of a public company when I was 23 years old. That doesn't make any sense. The CFO was a mentor of mine from Ernst & Young. And so I worked for him, but he liked me and gave me an opportunity early on to learn. And I was filing everything by paper that you FedEx to the SEC, like 10Ks, 10Ks. That's how you did things then. And they launched this thing called Edgar, which is electronic filing. And I was one of the 6 alpha customers to do it because I was one of the few that signed up. Nobody wanted to do it. But I was like, get me out of paper nightmare. And so I literally would put it in WordPerfect, and my 10Q or 10K, I would Edgarize it myself by writing code into the WordPerfect, and then dial into like, and upload my 10Q into the SEC database. I was done. It took me like 3 hours, 4 hours to do it then, instead of like days of photocopies and proofreading paper and stuff. And I was like, this is pretty cool. It's going to change this whole, electronic sharing of data and such. And there was this new thing. My parents, my mom, my dad was a computer programmer. My mom was a licensing attorney, one of the first 100 people at Sun Microsystems, like very early on, tech company, lawyer. And so I had computers in my house from a very young age. I was a coder at a young age. And I was fascinated by CompuServe. Nobody knows really what that was, but it was like early internet version. And when this web thing started coming, I was like, I dove right in. Now the bad news is, it took about 3 or 4 minutes for a page to load up. So you would like click on a link and then go do something else, go back to your regular job and then come back and click. And it was all mostly entertainment and porn. But it was very interesting, like how fast, getting kind of information like that. And I was filing on these stuff at SEC. I'm spending way too much time in my early career, but there's a reason. I realized that, wait a minute, like I was also still sending paper copies of all our 10Ks and 10Ks and prospectuses and such to investors. Why don't I just post it on a web page and people can come get it? And like I can give them a link and they can click on it just like I was doing. So a buddy of mine who was selling handbags at Macy's, and I founded a company called Investor's Edge that provided stock information distribution for public companies to investors. And we signed a deal with Data Broadcasting Corporation for $10,000 a year for the exclusive right to stock quotes, because we needed a hook to get people to come to the website, consumers and such, to get copies of the prospectuses. And we had to delay it 20 minutes because Bloomberg had the real time right. So we negotiated 20 minutes and we had a 10-year exclusive right to that deal. And I realized right then we could see what this guy was selling handbags in Macy's. I was like a junior controller, and we knew more about what was happening than really anybody else. It's like we were right in the middle of it. We were living these things every day. And so I quit my job as controller of a biotech company, went straight into internet startups, and the rest is history. Just like I did a lot of startups. I was usually working 2 or 3 at a time in the 90s. There were lots of good ideas. There weren't enough people on the internet to make any money. So we had this big bubble that built up and then it burst. But I learned so much in that time frame about how the problem with new form factors like the internet is old business models didn't work. Mm-hmm. E-commerce didn't come along till years later. Like advertising didn't have enough people. There weren't enough eyeballs to multiply by the number of blah, blah, blah. Like you had to get creative. And I struggled to figure out how to monetize these internet companies I was working on. When it all started collapsing, I sold my last one to a company in Utah called myfamily.com. And they paid cash. And so I was like, sweet, we're done. I got into get my PhD in economics at the University of Montana. Now here we go. 10 years of working in the internet was fun. I didn't make any money, but I learned a ton. And now I'm going to go get my PhD in economics. And my board, I still had to tell them like, hey, we're getting cash, so just take the cash. But bad news is the company buying us doesn't know what they're doing. They're going to go out of business in 6 months. So Then about a week later, I got a call from the board chair of the acquiring company saying, can you come give us that presentation to us? And I'm like, well, it's not, you're not going to like what I say, but I did. And that, I went there and I said, look, you're going to run out of money. You have this huge advertising base, it's garbage, but you have this little subscription business. And subscription is the only way to make money on the internet right now. And this subscription business is doing $7 million a year, but it has a proprietary data set. And it has potentially unlimited customers that all just need to be like turned on to what this product is. I didn't know anything about geology. What I knew is that I knew, okay, how am I going to, I knew that scarcity, supply and demand, like scarcity of supply. And if you could drive demand, you could price control and you could drive a ton of money, ton of revenue. And they said, okay, come, we'll hire you, come here, do that plan. I deferred my PhD for a year. I'm now in my 27th year of deferral, so that's too bad, but someday I'll get back there. And I fired 600 people in my first 60 days of that company, down to 200, and cut everybody's salary by 20%. And I said, if we can get profitable in a year, I'll pay you all a bonus of the salary you didn't get paid plus another 10%. But we just need to like create the engine to do this. And I did it with a guy named Craig Sherman, who's a Meritech partner. Meritech's in BC, in Palo Alto. He had been doing loyalty programs like AAA or points programs type of things. And he taught me what customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value meant. Like that wasn't a new thing. That had existed forever in loyalty programs and such, magazines and things, subscriptions. But we've now applied that to the internet. And I went crazy. I literally lived on 2 payrolls and spent every dollar I could on this new search engine that I could programmatically bid on called AdWords in Google. I was the number 2 or number 3 keyword buyer for 2001 to 2004 on Google. They would send engineers out to try and figure out what I was doing in Provo, Utah. Of course, I wouldn't tell them shit. Like they're just gonna they eventually just kept raising my minimum bids, but I was bidding 40,000 keywords real time using lifetime value over CAC performance. And I grew that business to about 350 million in 4 years revenue. And I was like, that's as big as it can be. There can't be that many people care about genealogy. I was wrong. That's a $2 billion plus revenue business doing 35% operating margins today. Had a great run. But I was like, I can't do this, but I've been using this product, analytics product, to do all this work, to measure, the funnels and connect it to the purchasing behavior and understand what had all these lifetime value calculations. And so I went to be the CFO of that company. It was Omniture, and it was doing 18 million in revenue, but it was a web analytics business. And basically we productized my Ancestry optimization models into that company and turned into maybe one of the first explain what SaaS business models were. So this is 2004. SaaS business model is just a subscription model, it's just lifetime value over CAC. I mean, there's a lot of other things going on, but in the early days, all I cared was how much does it cost to acquire a new customer, and subscription and renewals, and layer on additional cross sells and upsell, lifetime value, and then we just turned that into an engine. And then we were the 4th largest company in a crowded space, but we could grow faster because we had insights. My Series C, a guy named Rory O'Driscoll from Scale led it. He didn't believe in the model. He's like, Mike, you're not making any money. You're spending it as fast as you make it. I'm like, you don't understand, like SaaS businesses, it's a lifetime value thing. Who cares what my revenue is now? What cares is how much revenue I'm going to make over the next X from this cohort. He's just like, I don't understand that. So I went through this whole analysis I had done, which lifetime value over CAC, and he's like, holy. And I had a ratio, and he's like, that number is magic. And that's where the magic number came from. If you ever use magic number for SaaS, came from my diligence of getting diligenced by Rory O'Driscoll. But that magic number was the critical piece. The irony is I ran an across every SaaS business I could get. And the only one that had better numbers than Omniture was Salesforce. And they were the only SaaS company that was public at the time, 2005. So I took every penny I had and every penny I made, and I bought Salesforce stock at like $12 a share in 2005. And that's how I bought my house, which was really great because I could tell they were going to inflect from looking at the numbers from that. We took Omniture public. We bought 5 companies. We bought our largest competitor for pennies after we had basically bought them one customer at a time for a while. And whether the financial crisis, it was brutal. Our revenue and profits never went down quarter over quarter, and our stock went from 33 to 6 in that time frame. Being public company, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about predictability and being able to forecast and being straight with investors. And also, none of that matters if the market collapses because multiples are ruthless. We're seeing that in the SaaS apocalypse right now. We ended up selling to Adobe for $1.8 billion. It was a 4x, 5x revenue multiple. And people thought it was absurd at the time. And we think about what happened with SaaS multiples later. But Shantanu Narayan, who's the CEO of Adobe, is a brilliant man, maybe one of the best tech CEOs of the last 25 years. And he had a dying business. He had this really big, successful franchise in Photoshop and Acrobat and Flash. Remember Flash? Probably nobody remembers Flash. The reason you don't remember it is right about that time, this guy named Steve Jobs got pissed at Adobe, and he said because Adobe's software ran slower on Macs than it did on PCs, and he's like, that's unacceptable. You have to fix that. Adobe didn't get around to it, so Steve Jobs did 2 things. He made it so Flash could never run on Macs again, killed $1 billion business overnight for Adobe, and took CDs out of Macs. So you couldn't load software any longer using a CD. It wasn't built in, you had to buy one. And of course, everything in Adobe was CDs. Shantanu panicked. He's like, holy crap, I've got to get everything into the cloud and delivered non-on-premise as fast as I can. Went and bought Omniture. As much, yes, for the marketing business, that for $400 million business when he bought it is now $8 billion a year for Adobe. They bought other things, but that was the kernel. But what he bought was 35 data centers around the world with 40,000 servers and expertise. The guy who ran data centers globally for Omniture in 2009 when we were acquired still runs them for Adobe globally today. The guy who ran all the enterprise software contracting and SaaS contracting for Omniture in 2009 still runs it for Adobe today. The guy who ran all of enterprise sales, same thing, still runs it for Adobe today. Like, he bought an expertise in delivering business models into where he wanted product to innovate. Incredibly proficient. And humbly, he also made me head of operations to pivot the entire back end from a CD business into essentially a SaaS business. They had 11 instances of SAP that didn't integrate. They consolidated on Excel to do their SEC filings. It was a total disaster. They had a 50-person FP&A team. I had a 4-person FP&A team. Within 6 months, my 4-person FP&A team was running all of Adobe's FP&A because they weren't doing anything automated. We were using a product that has since been bought by Oracle and shut down because that's what they do. But it was all databases. I didn't hire finance people, actually. I hired mathematicians and database administrators to be my FP&A people. I had the finance, perspective. I just needed people who were better at math and computers, moving data around than I was. And, that was an amazing pivot. When they bought Omniture, the stock dropped 20% on the news, went from 33 to 27. It was a 30x multiple within 5 years of value. Massive pivot of an entire business and hugely accretive. I would say it's one of the best tech pivot acquisitions. Certainly the last 25 years, Adobe's done a few of them. They started, in PostScript printing, and they did Acrobat, and then they did Photoshop. They've been reinventing themselves every year, but that was a business model innovation. I think that was amazing. So all that kind of led me to, Adobe was great. It was killing me commuting to San Jose. That's a long story. So I went to Pandora. It was like music streaming. I didn't know anything about music, but here was another technical change, like a delivery. I'd seen using subscriptions through providing information globally over this internet thing. Then cloud delivered software completely changed how software worked. Now we had this streaming. Pandora had just been part of the launch of the first iPhone. They were one of the few apps that worked on the first iPhone. They went from 4 million users to like 60 million users in 1 year. Just an amazing hockey stick, all driven by, the product was the same. It was just now new form factors for delivering the product. Hugely messy licensing issues that we could do an hour on that. But we just diversified revenue, built that business up, dramatically improved. The revenue per minute of music served went from about $20 to about $60 in that time frame. We talked about earlier, 350 million to 1.4 billion in revenue when we sold to Sirius, about $1.5 billion in revenue. And then I was hired. So I went to work for Google because it was easy. I mean, literally, like after doing all these startups, Google it was amazing. Like you didn't have to worry about money anymore. That turned out to be the whole reason Ruth hired me. Ruth Porat. I had 11 interviews. I think I met every SVP and most of the VPs that are in Mountain View before they hired me. I was the only non-Googler when she created the divisional CFOs. The other 4 were internal promotions. And I was like, Ruth, why me? And she's like, we need to put business models on products. That's the first thing. And I'm a business model innovation person. The second is you have scars. Like nobody here has ever had a tough day. And and I'm like, wait, you hired me because I've like struggled and failed a bunch. Basically, that was it. Like the things that were hard and made my career difficult at times were exactly why she hired me. It's like making hard choices. A lot of that. I mean, they can tell you. When I got there, we were doing $8 billion in free cash flow a quarter. I thought that was absurd. I was there a little over 3 years. We did $24 billion in free cash flow the quarter I left. So dramatic efficiency improvements, shutting down products. We turned photos from $1 billion a year loss product to break even. All changing the business model associated with it. Insights. How do you think if product is the same? It was like, okay, what are the things you can control about cost? What are the bottlenecks that drive costs, and where can you drive revenue, and how do you figure those things out? And then I did 2.5 years of COVID relief at Color. That was my first health tech piece. It was a little tiny product that was doing like 15 million a year, but it was really good at delivering therapeutics and to people in remote areas. Took it from 15 million to 400 million in revenue a year, delivered 100 million tests and about 50 million vaccinations across the country, did $1 billion in revenue and 350 million in free cash flow in 2.5 years, and then shut it all back down again when COVID ended. That was a very weird job. And this whole time, AI is sort of percolating. I'd worked with Gradient when I was at Google. That was basically a bunch of science experiments in AI, but it's fascinating. Google had come out with Google Brain, the early AI ML products and such. So now I was seeing like, here's this whole new theme. Like products are going to be creative all over the place. They're going to need business models to figure out how to do this. And so I've been advising a lot of stuff through my limited partnership relationships. Chris Manzi's CEO of Viz, lives a few blocks from me here in the Mission in San Francisco. And so I said, well, healthcare is like it's got a good mission, it's a mission-driven thing. And if we can solve that, there's massive dollars associated with it. 2 years into it, I haven't solved anything yet. I mean, company's doing pretty well and we're growing pretty well, but it's a super hard market. Much harder than I thought. Nothing was harder than music. So that's kind of the theme. If you look at my background, look at LinkedIn or whatever, you're like, what are the connections between all these companies? All over the place, direct to consumer, enterprise. Other than technology, the connection is there's an inflection point, a change in the way a market's working.
Mm-hmm.
And that's driving extraordinary product innovation. It's changing markets, creating markets. And in Ancestry, that market didn't exist. It created something from nothing that wasn't possible until you had the internet to distribute genealogy information. So when that product innovation is happening, you have to fast follow with financial and business innovation in order to optimize the opportunity. And I just couldn't wait to get involved in AI. Plus my partner, she has her own law firm that does tech transactions between companies. She mostly is on the other side of a deal with OpenAI or the various big LLM companies and companies trying to use their data. And so that's all we talk about at dinner anyway. So I figured I might as well do that full time. So that's the saga. So we're all done. So I think that was fun. No, but it's all that time I've been a CFO, but really, I'm a CPA, but kind of a bad one. I hire good CPAs. We focus on pattern recognition, what's happening, how markets are changing, how our product fits into that market, and then how can you build businesses around that innovation and to create a new category defining business. And that's the fun part. That's why I'm probably going to do it for another 10, 20 years. We'll see.
That is incredible, Mike. The whole story. Well, first of all, you guys are all besties with Mike now, because even Lucy and I have never heard anything beyond the LinkedIn story, like whatever is on LinkedIn, but we're thrilled to hear all of these things. And you did such a good job in explaining how there is a thread, right, to your career always. It's not apparent always. It's not on the surface, right? It doesn't have to be very logical, but there's a thread to it. It's incredible. Also, I'm really impressed with your memory, all the numbers here and there. That's a generation before AI for you guys.
Yeah, I didn't have to memorize anything. I don't memorize anything. Don't ask me what business numbers are.
Exactly. Just remember. No, I'm trying to remember my oldest name right now, my oldest son's name. So that's where I am. But so I obviously stalked your LinkedIn mildly before this conversation, and I saw that you became CFO at 12 years old or around that, right? So yes, by my very precise calculations, you were 12. So tell us then, what is the kind of a story of the evolution of the CFO? I think a lot of us are either just entering the CFO roles or in the beginning of that career. How does CFO role evolve? It's a pinnacle of the financial career in general, right? But then your scope grows, and how can you develop? What is the CFO 1 year in, 5 years in, 10 years in?
Yeah, it's very different. And by the way, most of my tenures have been 4 to 6 years. So, and I think it's not a coincidence or not a coincidence. I don't know, but I think that's also because the companies I'm choosing, pack in 15 to 20 years of evolution into a very short time, because I'm choosing markets that are rapidly evolving. Almost every time I've gone to a company that I don't really know much about yet. Maybe I've done all my research. Easier to do research now, of course, but you don't know the ins and outs until you've been there. I tell consultants who want to go into operations all the time, just because you can go in and do a process improvement project and give the CEO a recommendation on how to reduce costs doesn't mean you know how to run a business process. It's very different once you're inside and doing something. So I think the initial 1 year, the beginning, is all just learning who's good on the team, where the gaps are, figuring out how the business works today, where the bottlenecks are, building trust with the CEO and sales leadership, building those relationships, making sure that you're right sized for the opportunity. I mean, at Viz, after 6 months, I shrunk the business down by a third. So they were just doing a lot of things that weren't creating value. And it was pretty easy to accelerate growth and drive profitability. Easy. I mean, that wasn't easy, but like, because you know, after I had done this enough, like the more I got into it, the more I realized that you could do that. So that first year or two is understanding the economics of the business and how the business works. Like at Pandora, it was music licensing and how costs are driven. And the reason I bring that up is there's a direct analogy to AI. In Pandora, the more activity we had, of course, we're trying to drive engagement, listen to more songs, and you know, Pandora is really great at that. Every song we played cost us money to deliver. So if we weren't monetizing those extra songs, like if Lucy listened to 5 straight hours of Fleetwood Mac, like that was going to cost me a lot, and there was no advertiser in the world who was going to pay me enough to cover that. So you had to start to get real creative on monetization strategies quickly, because your product team is trying to drive product market fit, engagement. Like there's a real problem there. So understanding the unit economics of the business and the overall economics of your model, like that's all it is. Getting your arms around it, getting the data right, data hygiene right. At Adobe, that was my first 9 months on the job there, was just data with the CIO. And CIO, she became the CIO of Starbucks for many years afterwards, but that's all we did was create a data lake, get the right data into that data lake, and make sure it's clean. And you know, the hierarchies were right and all that kind of stuff. That was absolutely critical. Once you get the data right, then that's when you start doing the interesting stuff. You know, I say to CEOs when I start, I'm like, look, the first meeting, I guarantee you I can already tell you what it's gonna be like. And I know I haven't been in one of your board meetings. We're gonna get in there and they're gonna ask us questions about the numbers, and we're gonna argue about what the numbers are and what's real and what's not. Like the first thing you have to do is get the numbers right so that everyone trusts what the numbers are. Then you stop talking about the numbers. And that's that next phase. You get the numbers correct, get everything right. Then you say, okay, here are the insights. This is how the business works. And that, understanding how that business works, you kind of move, that's the like 3 to 5 years. You're starting to make decisions, how to scale, how to drive efficiency. And that's, you know, okay, now I can start telling investors how we're going to make money, how it's going to go from, you know, here to 100 million to 500 million, what that looks like, what the market has to do to get there. Because I can start, I can see, you know, this is the dynamic. Here's how the unit economics change over time. If we're successful in this market, expanding there. And then once you get that, then you're humming. That's when you can go public. I spent 9 years as a public company CFO. Like, you're predictable, you know what you're executing on. You're still, it's 80% of what you're doing is your current business. This might be a little different with some companies right now. 20% is what are the inflection points you can push back into the business to drive outsized growth and accelerate business. You're focused a lot more on capital structure, doing M&A, financing through debt, buybacks, like all the capital markets and financial discipline kind of kicks into that. And it becomes much less interesting. Hence, about 6 years in, that's about when, you know, I'm going to look for my next startup or next growth opportunity. And when I say startups, I mean, it doesn't have to be a small company. It's just a company that's at the beginning of its growth inflection. That's what I want to do. So I think that's the role. You can't skip ahead. You know? And that's one of the problems with bankers and consultants when they become CFOs, is they want to jump straight ahead to do capital markets transactions, and I'm going to build this strategy. And like, well, you haven't got the basics right. You don't even know what's real in the company yet. You got to get that stuff right to get there.
This was like a mini lecture, Mike. Thank you so much. And you touched upon, you touched upon some parts of the AI native versus the SaaS, right? Can you talk a little bit more of how is that changing, right? Like now, well, first of all, business models, right? Like we're probably at the time where we're still figuring out the business models, all the companies for the AI native products, right? Like outside of just the chatbots, there's so much to figure out because the cost is incredible, right? Like when you go into anything AI. So how does the CFO role differ for AI native startup versus like a traditional SaaS, right? That we're more familiar with.
So, I'm speaking from a relatively narrow, like my job, my peers that I like know in the Bay Area and such, but I've kind of hinted at it a little bit. The first thing is that revenue is generally harder, revenue recognition is harder, and meaning that subscription, or because SaaS inherently was subscription-based, fee-based, upsell, cross-sell based, it's very predictable and knowable and forecastable. Most AI is kind of where SaaS has gone recently, if maybe not all AI, is going to be consumption-based. And consumption-based from a forecasting and a revenue predictability perspective is super challenging. You end up doing a lot more highly complex math and modeling to look, one of the some of the cooler technologies I'm seeing now are doing more Monte Carlo type analysis inside a AI model. So you're using kind of our old, statistical models and then teaching an LLM how to do that kind of analysis in order to get ranges of outcomes, because it's much less predictable than just layering on books of business on something. But I hinted on the second part, which is, I think, the really big difference is that unit economics can be a big trap. It's not like SaaS. SaaS was generally, I spent a lot of money early on to build product and servers and then the more customers I layered onto it, the more I could drive my customers. I was getting leverage off of that with scale. That doesn't happen in a consumption-based model that's token-based, right? So your costs scale sometimes linearly or barely non-linearly with your revenue. And you better be generating revenue. If your costs are just scaling and you don't have a revenue model to map onto that, it's going to be dangerous really fast. And there's a reason why a lot of these AI companies are raising so much money is they're burning money like crazy, and it only really collecting that cash. I saw a lot of that in the 90s. Like, people raise money to spend money without knowing how to make money, and so that created a bubble that burst pretty hard in the year 2000. I'm not saying there's a bubble here. I'm saying that there's a risk of that for sure, and that's because of that. You really have to know your unit economics, which means you may throttle your growth, because growing at all costs doesn't work in a consumption-based model, because your costs will just eat it up. Like, even in my own internal AI use, and we can talk about that a little bit, I throttle my own team's use because I've seen it happen. They run one model, they ask one question the wrong way, and all of a sudden they've consumed $500,000 worth of tokens, and and they were doing a non-accretive job. Like, nothing they were doing is generating revenue, but they just spent $500,000 because they didn't write the prompts correctly, and we didn't have controls on that. Like, I refuse to roll AI out without having that kind of management on that. So I think that's both an internal cost control thing, but it's definitely a business model thing that's really different with AI native companies, because the LLMs were a little bit at the slaves to them at this point. It's going to change. Like, the value proposition is going to go from infrastructure and engines. They're all commodities. I mean, shit, we were talking about ChatGPT is getting less, and right now I think Claude is by far the most accurate, but in 6 months I can be flipped again. Like, they're going to keep getting better, and Gemini is getting better and better. Like, the differentiation is going to become at the AI companies that are at the point of inference that Satya calls, which is like the point of where you have access to data, often proprietary data, at the moment of agency. So when someone's making a decision to drive economic action, either your own employee or your customer, and that you can use whatever model you want to use in that context. And now we'll be able to start negotiating the cost of tokens down and negotiating that. I think you'll see that come back to earth, just like bandwidth came back to earth. When internet companies kind of got real about consuming it. And so that's that dynamic. If you can get smart on that now, like, if there's one thing you can learn, it's become a student of GPU costs, token costs, and what those unit economics are for your business. Like, that's the one thing I think that scares me, that keeps me up at night. And I would tell you that's another thing. The last thing is, like, I think the moats are different, and they're related to what I said earlier. The moats are going to not be Google has this great moat because they have indexed the world, because there's going to be 6 Googles and they're all the same. The moats are going to be access to proprietary data and agency with decision makers at the point of action. And that's one of the reasons I went to Viz. It's not a Viz commercial, but we're in 2,000 hospitals, 70,000 HCPs, all using our app on their phone. That footprint is incredibly hard to replicate. That is access to data, proprietary data, health systems data, it has to be HIPAA compliant, blah, 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 and agency in the hands of the doctors and they're making the decision. So that, my opinion, that's where the value is going to accrue over time. But I think that's another big difference is that big SaaS companies, bigger guys kept getting bigger and bigger and kind of sucking it up. And they could create sort of offshoots to their primary product that would take over the next market. I think that's going to be harder and harder to do, to the extent that data is hard to access. So there you go. That is definitely a lecture.
Thank you, Mike.
See, I always wanted to be a professor. I'm trying to teach.
Yeah, you would be a great professor. There's still time. And I have 4 questions. However, I want to open it up to the group to ask their questions. If there's any, please go ahead, because I want to make sure that I have questions from the audience. Oh, not everyone all at once.
Maybe Mike, I'll ask a question. Can you guys hear me?
True, yeah.
Okay, cool. Look, just super fascinating. One thing that really struck me, what I said about FP&A mathematicians and database administrators is just so true, and it just kind of speaks to me as well. But I'm curious about, what your sweet spot you kind of described, the type of company you kind of joined and kind of was the theme and kind of getting the data right and kind of all the path. And, being a public company CFO versus private company CFO. So it sounds like it's more about kind of motivation to kind of build something interesting and kind of what you think kind of your kind of the value adding. Just can you talk more about that? I'm kind of at crossroads, which way to go, AI company, public company, private company.
So I think it's a mix of what I'm curious about and where I thought the market was going. There's an old Gretzky saying, right? How come you're always there, there to take the shot? He's like, because I skate where the puck is going. So I spend a lot of time paying attention into what's happening in the world in the business world and where things are going and where technology is going. I spent years researching autonomous driving and decided that there's going to be 2 winners, Waymo and Tesla, and so I ended up at Google. But I could be wrong. Maybe Rivian or somebody, or there's a Chinese EV company that does roll, but it just seemed like everything else was a product or a feature. And I was kind of, I like working on sort of transformative platform companies. And that's not for everybody. So I think it's a big part of it is, what are you curious about, what you care about? A big part of it is what do you think is going to be successful? For me, I want to go be a part of a team that wins. I bring that energy to the team. I'm not here to punch a clock. I want to win markets. We maybe did a little too good a job at Android, but that happens sometimes. Were a lot of good decisions we made there, but a few of them got in trouble a little bit. That's okay. I also think there's a lifestyle part of this. That has nothing to do with what your job is. A lot of people, especially Googlers, would ask me hey, I've got this startup job and I want to go do this. Lucy was one of these people. I gave her advice. She didn't take it. And really, it was you have a little girl at home and you're well paid at a great company and you're doing interesting work at Google. Why would you go to a startup where you're going to work a lot and get paid less? Yes, you have this opportunity to build something and everything, but there's a time in your life. I think it's always important to balance that. I also the last thing I would say is you be opportunistic. These companies these moments in time don't come along very often. Mm-hmm. Great companies, interesting companies that are going to create outsized returns don't happen that often. They need to be seized and they need to be chased. And so I spent a lot of time talking to people and finding interesting things, finding these companies. Like I said, the Ancestry one, I found by accident, but once I found it, I was like, this is going to be a great business. And then Omniture, well, I'm like, I already knew that product helped me build a genealogy business. I didn't know anything about genealogy, but it went crazy. Why? Because we used math appropriately to play on margin results. So I don't know if that's helpful, but those are the kind of factors that I look at. Lucy, a little green hand.
I think Ricardo was in front of me. He was number 1. I was number 2.
Oh, sorry, I can't see them all. So
yeah, no worries. Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate that. Mike, this has been great, very informative.
thank you.
My question is, as we all lead teams of varying sizes, and obviously AI is being introduced, we're finding creative ways to leverage AI to improve our workflows. Given your years of experience, your forethought on how the markets are moving, how are you changing how your teams are structured or the talent you're adding to your team to take advantage of these different trends in AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have always been a little bit of a maverick in this space. Like, I don't build teams the way they like traditionally get done. But I would say that one of the things I've done best in my career is build teams. I know where my weaknesses are. I make sure that those weaknesses are covered by the best person who knows how to do that, whether it's accounting or treasury or tax. Like those areas, I'm not good at it. I don't care that much about it. So, but those are do not fail kind of moments, right? So you build teams that complement each other. You build teams, not groups of people who do work, teams that do work, so they learn each other's jobs. At Pandora, I had a very dorky accountant. All he wanted to do was close the books, and he was really good at what he did. And I forced him to be the business partner to the chief revenue officer, and he learned so much about go-to-market motions and how to measure that, and actually made him a much better revenue accountant, interestingly, later. And now he just crossed his 8th year as a CFO of Dropbox, which is, he left me to go take that job. And he would never have done that job if he hadn't done that. So I think that's, when you're building teams, that's really important. The other thing I would say is that, like, disrupt yourself aggressively. Like, I followed everybody's instructions to use FP&A software, and none of it could give me the right answers. And so I used databases and mathematicians and database administrators, and that gave me much better answers because I knew what I trusted my own instincts on how to do things. Now I've gone back and forth with FP&A software. Don't get me wrong. I was a plan person for a very long time too, but always like focused on how do we get data in the right hand of the right people to make that things work. Now I just canceled my FP&A software subscription last month and standardized on Cowork and Claude. Now that works for me. I have very specific things. Interesting, as Zeke was talking about how the accuracy has dropped on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is really good at taking in data. It's really, really terrible at forgetting data, right? So that's a disaster. Because in a startup, sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, sometimes things turn out to be false. You don't have a super predictable market, so it just is really hard to use AI creatively. The beauty about Cowork is you create a folder, you tell it only take data out of the folder, you pull things out, put it in. Like, it's just better. You control the environment. Yeah, I agree. I love Notebook for that reason. Like, anything that can control the data that's being accessed, I think, is really important. And now I'm retraining my whole team, just like I went to accountants and database administrators. Now they're all becoming AI experts. I tend to hire much younger people, which is, like people who don't think they know how to do everything yet. Like, so younger creative people who want to learn. My AI champion is 24 years old. A girl came through our deal desk organization, and she is just hungry and aggressive. And I find people who want to be champions, and I champion them. So, I think that, eyes wide open. I think accounting is a little different. Like, you can't jump straight in, have AI do all your closes. You're going to end up with rev rec problems. You're going to end up with reconciliations that don't work. So, that's kind of a laundry list, but I think the faster you take on technology, you can make your employees so much more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
You get so much more work done. You know, the reality is I do the work that in prior businesses I had 8 or 10 person FP&A teams, and I just do it all myself. And I know how to prompt things, and I know what data to pull. But instead of telling my team to do that, I do it all myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that you should think about. And one of the questions that we thought about talking about is like, if AI takes away 80% of your time, what do you do with that 80% of the time? It's like, it's going to take 80% of the busy work away. I don't know if it's 80% of your time. I don't think that's 80% of mine, but I'm definitely reallocating that time into, you know, much more complex, forward-thinking projects that I would have maybe never got around to or gotten around to eventually, but don't have the time for now. I think we get to do a lot more interesting things right now. And, you know, I made it mandatory, everyone on my team, to spend an hour every day using AI. That's how we got started, just an hour. And it didn't have to be company stuff, like plan your vacation itinerary to French Polynesia, like find, you know, what restaurants you're gonna, you know, what's the best restaurant that your wife's gonna like based upon what you know she likes now. That's a new place she's never been. You know, like just understand how to ask prompts and how it works and what it's good at, what it's not good at. And then when you translate that to work, just like the light bulbs just go off.
Now I see how you got to $500,000 of tokens.
I do my limit almost every day. My own self-imposed token limit, about 3 p.m., which is nice. Then I'm done.
Actually, my question is just a follow-up of that. Mike, I mean, you're definitely a power user of many of these AI tools now. How do you think about adopting an AI native SaaS solution, if that's the right name for them, like a ERP that's AI native versus waiting for NetSuite or for QuickBooks to launch these features? Like, what other tools is your team using aside from Claude Cowork? What have you found helpful? What works? What doesn't or didn't? And kind of what's your prediction around these finance technology solutions in the next couple of years? There's so many now.
So like I said, I think basic accounting stuff, like putting the books together and closing books, is going to be hard. Eventually they will do that well. Reconciliations, like stuff around it, I think work. Auditing, contract reviews, like contract reviews is a no-brainer. And I'm, you know, because my partner is a lawyer, like that's something I know a lot about. But, you know, our deal desk is so efficient now. He pulls all the relevant terms, compares it to what we have. Where do we have a problem? They've like turned around our legal team to turn and deal desk turn around deals in 20 minutes. It used to take 2 or 3 hours. Like it's more accurate. You know, that's an area that's a no-brainer. I think spend analytics, anything that's analytic based right now is good. Anything that needs to have a perfect answer isn't good. So if you're looking for insights or areas to go chase, like looking for bottlenecks in your financial model, like Claude's really good at looking at, you know, financial models and comparing it to other companies and where are my costs out of whack, and then okay, load your costs into there. What doesn't look right, and you know, vendor contract reviews. You know, there's all kinds of those kind of things that like you just and it becomes fun. You're just so productive. What else is a good one? Market research is a good one. So like we're trying to figure out what disease to go into next. What's the TAM associated with that? Who are the competitors? What do those products, features, and functionality look like compared to ours? You know, you can do a full market analysis like that in a very short time. And I think it's as good as anything you get from hiring a marketing research firm. Those firms are done. Market research. I mean, I think eventually, like PR, a lot of the comms are all going to shrink down quite a bit. Advertising agencies and such. A lot of it, not that the creative stuff will be done by AI. That's all there, but that's most of what these ad agencies do is create copy and create, like they take the form and then they roll it out to everything in your company. Well, you know, that stuff can be done and automated in a really very efficient way.
Thank you, Barrett.
Mike, thanks so much. This has been wonderful. Question for you, kind of extending like how you're developing your team to maybe this group where there's a lot of fractional CFOs that are, working to, demonstrate their capabilities to the leadership team of their target company. There's individuals looking for their next role. What are you looking for in kind of that more leadership position of a fractional CFO or a VP of finance, in like the skill set that they have, and both like the technical AI understanding, but then also how they're thinking about driving the business and everything?
I think there's two ways fractional CFO can actually, this is almost a perfect time to be a fractional CFO, because you can be so effective and efficient in a relatively, 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week or whatever you're committed to that client. And I think the two big ways are like, how do you use AI to improve the speed and accuracy of processes like expense review, like things that were very manual before can be done very quickly and very accurately with AI, like variance analysis. I mean, that can be done extremely well with it. You have Slack and email plugins and Claude. I mean, it's amazing. Like I ask it like, well, what's driving this cost up? And there's some conversation some engineers had, and it pulls that out. And I've got at least a direction to go. So I think there's use of these tools, either whether they're point solutions like spend and limits, or the more generic ones like Claude or Perplexity or ChatGPT. I mean, embracing that is really going to make the difference, because then you get to spend more and more time on the insights of it, the pattern recognition, helping the CEO think about what their options are, help define what the market opportunity is. Like I said, market research, basic TAM work. You can start to like help them frame decisions in a way that they never could have, and you couldn't have it. Doing that kind of data, that research took too long, and so at 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week, you're not going to be able to do that. Now with 2 or 3 hours a week, you can at least create, a concept, some perspective that you can now drill down on with the CEO or the CRO and think about how you think about strategy. As a CFO, my job in that senior leadership team is to provide a financial perspective into complex strategic decision making. And sometimes that is, what can we afford? Sometimes that is how big the market is, where pricing power is, where our most effective marketing is. Like, I can provide those kind of insights, I think, a lot more effectively. And it's a great time to get, like, I see the direct analogy to lawyers. The lawyers now can do much of their work very quickly. And then it's that expertise, it's that last 20, 30% of their work is going to be like, okay, now that we've gotten rid of all the easy stuff, here are the 5 issues that matter in a deal. And when you're negotiating with a vendor, you can do the same thing. You're helping an engineer understanding the cost of their software, what's driving their costs, thinking about it. Like, all that can be done and categorized a lot faster. And now you get into the consultative part of the job, which is, like I said, the most fun, but also the most valuable, where you're bringing the most value. So I don't work exactly full time right now because, I'm busy. I'm getting married this year. Like, I have a lot of free time things I'm trying to do, but I can probably do 2 of these jobs right now because of AI.
Cool.
Pretty great.
Mike, we're looking for fractional CFOs. You should join us.
I would love to work for you, Lucy. Good boss you are. I've seen it.
We're all independent operators, so you're always welcome.
Yes, but if you really want to work for Lucy, we can consider that too.
Yeah.
Zig's the boss. All right, I think we're over time, but we
Well,
still have 17 people.
Telling the story, and thank you for listening. And you can get my contact information from the Zeke or Lucy, MikeInParkCity@gmail.com. It's pretty easy to remember. But I'm, always happy. As you can tell, I like to talk and think and debate, and it won't cost you anything. It might be worth that, but always happy to talk through stuff if you're looking for a second opinion on something. And always looking for interesting businesses too. So if you're a fractional CFO of a really great business, that's ready to inflect, give them my name too.
Really appreciate it, Mike. Thank you so much. And we would probably bring you back at some point because we have different types of forums. We would like your second opinion on certain things, and we would love to have a debate and conversation around certain things that are developing, right? In AI world for finance, there's so much that will change in the coming years. So we would love to get you back at some point. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Great meeting y'all. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Have a good one.